It started quietly, the way the biggest messes always do. One email, anonymous, cold, dropped into the inboxes of major newsrooms like a match tossed into dry grass. No name, no attachments, just a claim that hit straight at the heart of something carefully polished for years. The Archewell Foundation, Harry and Meghan's charity, the place that was supposed to stand for compassion, fairness, and clean intentions. And suddenly, someone who said they had been inside that system was whispering, no, insisting that something wasn't right. The email didn't scream, it didn't rant. That's what made it unsettling. The sender said they were a former senior employee, someone who had directly handled the foundation's finances, someone who had watched charitable money move in ways that didn't sit right. Money labeled as internal expenses, money marked as personal project support, words that looked harmless on paper, respectable even. But according to this person, those words hid transactions that benefited the founding family themselves. And when questions were raised internally, the response wasn't clarification, it was removal. The questions I raised led to my removal, the email said, and then one line that stuck like a splinter. I don't believe I'm the only one who noticed it. Within hours of that email surfacing in the media, something shifted. Quietly, officially, the kind of shift that doesn't come with sirens or headlines, but with forms and procedures. The U.S. tax authorities expanded their scrutiny of Archewell. Not because of drama, but because systems react when patterns collide with attention. Money transfers were suddenly being examined alongside the Sussex's real estate timeline, and Archewell's response was brief, controlled, and polished. Everything was legal, everything was transparent, nothing to see here. But the questions didn't stop. They multiplied. Because if there was truly nothing wrong, why did one email shake the system this hard? Back in London, at the Daily Mail newsroom, December 12, 2025 didn't feel special at first. Just another morning of glossy charity press releases and recycled royal stories scrolling across screens, until that subject line appeared. Archewell, the truth behind the numbers, disposable email address, untraceable, the kind editors see all the time, but this one carried weight. The financial editor opened it and felt that familiar chill, not fear, not excitement, recognition. This was written by someone tired of being quiet. The sender explained they'd worked at Archewell for over 3 years, right after Megxit, back when the foundation was being built as the Sussex's fresh start. They weren't a temp or an outsider. They were in direct contact with the couple on financial operations. And then, months earlier, they were gone, fired, no real explanation. What drove them to speak wasn't bitterness, they said. It was watching sincere donations risk going to the wrong places while their concerns were brushed aside like a forbidden topic. No documents were attached. Smart move. Instead, the email pointed to something anyone could see. Archewell's latest public financial report, filed with the IRS in November 2024 for the 2023 fiscal year. The editor downloaded it immediately. The numbers didn't lie, but they didn't explain themselves either. Over $5.3 million in donations in 2023. A big rebound after the previous year's drop, mostly from one large anonymous donor. Then came the spending section, a massive chunk listed under vague categories like internal operating expenses and personal project support. Technically compliant, legally phrased, but too broad, too foggy, especially for a charity that had already been flagged before for late filings and missing grant distributions. Reporters started lining up timelines the way they always do, and that's when the coincidences began to feel heavy. Those large expenses happened right when the Sussex's Montecito mansion was being upgraded again. The house they bought in 2020 for $14.65 million was now valued close to double that. Rose gardens, pools, luxuries layered on luxuries, no direct proof tying charity money to personal upgrades, but the timing whispered. And whispers are enough to make people lean closer. The email never outright accused. It didn't need to. It simply told journalists how to read the numbers differently. And once that lens changed, the story stopped being about one anonymous message and became about a system that suddenly looked fragile under scrutiny. From that moment, Archewell wasn't just appearing in feel-good headlines. It was appearing in questions. 3 days later, across offices that don't care about feelings or PR, an alert lit up. Archewell Foundation, mentioned too frequently in a short time. In London, an HMRC specialist frowned. Archewell wasn't new to monitoring. Late filings, creative descriptions, nothing dramatic enough before to push further. But patterns matter. And across the Atlantic, at the IRS, a routine audit quietly shifted into an expanded review. Not an attack, just protocol. But in that world, protocol is where trouble begins. Data started stacking up. Transfers didn't go straight from the foundation to communities. They moved through intermediary companies tied legally to Harry and Meghan. Project management, strategic consulting, content development, all legal, all neat on paper, but thin on specifics. A journalist in New York looked at the flowchart and laughed dryly. Money takes a long detour, he said, then ends up very close to where it started. Pretty names, long-term mission support, operating expenses, safe words. But together, they painted a picture that didn't feel complete. The question changed. It wasn't, is there wrongdoing, anymore. It became, why so many layers? And why did those layers line up so neatly with changes in the founders' personal lives? The anonymous email no longer looked like a grudge. It looked targeted, like someone who knew exactly where to tap to make cracks appear. In Montecito, the sunlight still poured through the library windows when the IRS envelope arrived. Official seal, standard language, but thicker than usual. Meghan opened it, read fast, paused. Harry knew immediately something was off. The letter asked for detailed explanations of internal expenses and transfer structures. The reason was stated plainly: increased media attention following an anonymous email. Meghan refined it aloud. Media attention, she said. The email was just the catalyst. The lawyer echoed that calm confidence. Normal procedure, provide documents, no conclusions yet. Harry wasn't reassured. When the call ended, he leaned against the bookshelf, staring at the letter. Are you sure that person doesn't know more? He asked. Meghan smiled lightly, controlled. If they knew more, it would have been louder by now. Reasonable, polished, but it didn't settle him. The IRS meeting that followed wasn't like an interview. No narratives, just data. Questions drilled into specific expense items. Meghan spoke smoothly about global initiatives and complex structures. The inspector listened, then pressed again. Why weren't these items described more clearly, especially given feedback from a former employee? Meghan paused. Barely a beat. Administrative issue, she said. We're reviewing presentation. Harry barely spoke. When he did, it was simple. We're ready to cooperate. That silence wasn't strategy. It was someone realizing he might not know everything. Behind the scenes, the review deepened. Cash flow diagrams, property records, patterns repeating, transfers leaving Archewell, property deals following soon after. No accusations spoken aloud, but direction set. And outside, PR kicked in early. Denials, transparency, misunderstandings, too early, too fast. To investigators, that always feels like image management, not patience. In the reflex period that followed, Meghan turned crisis into control. Lawyers, accountants, advisors, not changing numbers, but shaping language. The essence and how others understand it are different, she said. More lawyers were hired, quietly, loud enough for legal circles to notice. If this was nothing, why prepare like it was war? Harry went to London, quietly, met people who knew how funds were supposed to be run without noise. The IRS noted everything, not emotionally, just facts. Expanded legal defense, external consulting, motives monitored. Meghan spoke on a podcast. Pressure, scrutiny, misunderstanding, no specifics. That choice sharpened suspicion. If it's transparent, why not show it? The former employee's silence now felt louder than any interview. The formal hearing came. Screens, documents. The nearly $5 million item was questioned directly. Meghan answered smoothly. Long-term initiatives, intermediary units listed, names flowed, but clarity didn't. Harry looked down. When asked directly, he admitted something new. Errors, underestimating complexity, not intent, but management flaws. The room shifted, one voice loosening, the other tightening control. Preliminary results followed. Reporting violations, structural reform required, activities temporarily suspended, no criminal charges, but no comfort either. Harry saw a chance to come clean. Meghan saw a reason to clamp down harder. Silence from the royal family said everything. Disappointment leaked quietly. At home, the arguments weren't loud, they were worse, calm, controlled. Harry wanted openness. Meghan warned it would only feed the media. Logic versus conscience. And in that space, something cracked. Harry realized he sounded like the employee who'd been fired for asking questions. Archewell restructured, paid fines, released cleaner reports. On paper, fixed. But suspicion doesn't vanish that way. It lingers. Harry spent more time away. Meghan rebuilt image. The file stayed open. And the original question remained unanswered, hanging heavy in the air. Not proven, not erased, just waiting. The quiet after everything was almost louder than the accusations themselves. No shouting headlines every morning anymore, no dramatic leaks, just this strange pause where everyone waited to see who would move first. For Harry, that silence was unbearable. It followed him through empty rooms, late nights, and long flights where sleep never really came. Every time he closed his eyes, the same thought returned, sharp and relentless. If nothing was wrong, why did it feel so wrong inside his chest? He replayed moments he had ignored before. The day the former employee was dismissed, how quickly it happened, how easily he accepted the explanation that it was necessary. Back then, he told himself he was protecting the mission, protecting peace. Now it felt like he had protected ignorance. And ignorance, once cracked, doesn't seal itself again. It bleeds into everything. Meghan moved differently, sharper, more focused. She treated the situation like a chessboard. Every move calculated, every word measured. To her, survival meant control. Control of language, control of timing, control of narrative. She believed deeply that once you surrendered details, you surrendered power. And power once lost never comes back cleanly. So she kept smiling, kept speaking about resilience and purpose, kept reminding everyone that audits were normal, scrutiny unfair, and intentions pure. Outwardly, she looked unshaken, but those closest could sense it. The tension behind the calm, the way every unexpected question tightened her jaw just a little too fast. Friends noticed the distance between them growing, subtle but undeniable. Not arguments exploding, but conversations shrinking. Harry asked fewer questions out loud, not because he had fewer, but because he already knew the answers he'd get. Meghan spoke more, filling spaces with certainty, as if certainty itself could erase doubt. Two people in the same room, carrying completely different fears, and the world kept watching. Analysts dissected the revised reports line by line. Yes, they were clearer. Yes, categories were more detailed, but clarity after pressure never feels the same as clarity offered freely. That difference mattered. Experts said it quietly but firmly. Transparency given only when demanded always leaves residue. It tells a story about mindset, not just numbers. Donors started hesitating, not fleeing, just pausing, waiting. Some organizations distanced themselves politely, nothing dramatic, just enough to signal discomfort. The kind of discomfort that doesn't scream scandal, but whispers mistrust. And whispers travel far. Harry felt it most when he returned to England. Old faces, old systems. People who understood silence, but also understood accountability. There, no one shouted accusations. They simply looked at him with that familiar mix of concern and disappointment. Not anger, worse, sad understanding. It reminded him of what he once believed he was building. Something better, something cleaner. Meanwhile, Meghan doubled down on rebuilding. New projects, new messaging, a future-focused tone. She refused to be defined by suspicion. In her mind, dwelling on the past only gave critics oxygen. But that refusal came at a cost. Because refusing to look back also meant refusing to fully acknowledge what had gone wrong, and with whom. The former employee never surfaced again. No interviews, no lawsuits, just silence. And that silence haunted the story, because people who lie usually keep talking. People who feel they've done their part often disappear. That absence became its own quiet accusation, hanging in the background of every discussion about Archewell. In the end, there was no explosive ending, no dramatic courtroom moment, no single truth revealed in one devastating sentence, just a slow erosion of trust, of unity, of certainty. Archewell continued. The mission survived on paper, but something intangible had changed forever. Harry stood at a crossroads he never expected, between loyalty and conscience, between control and honesty, between protecting an image and facing uncomfortable truths. And while the public waited for another headline, the real story unfolded privately, where no press release could reach. A story not about money alone, but about what happens when questions are silenced for too long, and what they turn into when they finally demand to be heard.